Hello class, my name is Joseph Murray and I had debate number 4 regarding the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is my debate response to Alexi Wright. So for starters, the war in the Pacific was not almost over. Rather, it was only just beginning. The United States had numerous successful land-hopping invasions of small islands on the periphery of the Imperial Japan land, but they were nowhere near actually concluding the war because they were not close enough to finish an invasion of Japan. They did not strike enough of the Japanese naval bases on the surrounding islands to actually have a substantial impact and sway the war. They were only just beginning. It was only phase 1 that the United States was in. They still had much more to go with Operation Downfall and the invasion of Japan. The war was not almost over. Also, to claim that since Germany surrendered, Japan would have done the same, so it's premature to drop a nuclear bomb on Japan, it's really, there's no correlation between what Japan was doing and what Germany was doing. If you look at the alliances that these two nations, Germany and Japan, had, it was more the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They weren't directly working together on very many things. The European war, the theater there was very removed from the Japanese theater. What happened in Europe very rarely impacted what Japan did. Japan and Germany weren't on the same page, so to speak. So just because Germany surrendered, that does not mean Japan was going to surrender. So the United States was planning an invasion of the Japanese mainland. It was Operation Downfall. The assumed casualties of American soldiers was anywhere from 500,000 at a minimum to getting to the millions of American soldier deaths. Now, if you look at the death counts of the encounters between the Japanese and the Americans throughout the war, the United States had a very high kill-death ratio. What that means is the United States would kill about 3 to 4 Japanese soldiers for every American that the Japanese killed, meaning when we were doing the island hopping, 4 Japanese soldiers died for every American soldier that died. The Japanese military had millions of soldiers, and they were not very efficient in keeping people alive. They were efficient in flooding. They had a different type of battle tactics. It was shock and awe, they sent a lot of people out at once when they were on the offensive, and then they hid when they were on the defensive. It's not a very efficient way to keep people alive, the Japanese strategy. So 500,000 minimum Americans die from the war, with countless Japanese soldiers dying in the invasion. Now, if we look at the European side of when the Allies invaded Europe, 350 to 500,000, give or take, German civilians died from aerial bombings from normal bombs. That is less than the total death count of Japanese civilians during the war. 4.3 million German civilians total died over the course of the reclamation of Europe by the Allies due to bombing. Starvation was a very big one, and just getting caught in the crossfire of war. Starvation is one of the biggest killers in city warfare due to the fact that they are so dense, the population. And the only difference between the European theater and the Japanese theater is that Japan was even more densely populated. If you think about it, the more people there are in a square mile radius, the more likely you are to accidentally kill someone when you drop a bomb. That also means that's the more people eating from a smaller food source. Japan was much more densely populated than Germany was, so all estimates of civilian casualties from a land invasion of Japan, were in the millions, if not tens of millions. So no, it is not better to have a land invasion of Japan than to nuke them. I know it's bad to accept the fact that lots of civilians died in the war, but to argue that since innocent civilians died, the war should not have happened, the bombing should not have happened, is just not fair, because the Japanese culture does not surrender. There is no surrender in Japanese culture unless you die. That means the Japanese people were not going to surrender. We saw that with the peace talks between the United States and Japan. It was not going to work. So unless there was a surefire way to hurt the Japanese at such a degree, in such a quick manner, that they had no option but to surrender, many more Japanese and Americans would have died in the long run. You also claim that it is wrong to drop a nuke on a country when the country doesn't even know what a nuclear bomb is. You said that the Japanese didn't know what a nuke is, and if they did, of course they would have surrendered. That's blatantly false. In 1934, the Japanese government ordered research into nuclear programs, not weapons, but nuclear energy. However, in 1939, the Japanese government started their nuclear weapons program with preliminary research into atomic fusion in 1941, with the actual construction of bombs starting in 1943. You cannot claim that a country doesn't know what a nuclear bomb is when they've had ongoing nuclear weapons programs for a half decade. It just doesn't work. So, in conclusion, it is a terrible thing that so many civilians had to die due to the atomic bombings, but of all the plausible outcomes, it was the most efficient way to finish the war with the least dead, because any land invasion, the continuing of the war, would have had many more people on both sides die. So it was the only choice we had. You're taking the stance that too many civilians died. It was the only solution wherein fewer civilians died. That's why it was permissible to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.